Welcome to TAMA Talks, brought to you by the Torrance Art Museum Advocates. I'm Janine Madden, current TAMA president, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Today we will be discussing work which is currently on view in the main gallery at the Torrance Art Museum in a show called Risky Business, a painter's forum, curated by Marie Thibeault and Max Presneill. The focus of the show seeks to address how the concerns and expectations of AI begin to dominate the narrative in our increasingly technologically dependent society. Some artists reply with the personal mark, risk-taking, chance, the unknown endpoint, the illogical, or the mystery to produce a reflection of a living, very human experience. The exhibition is on view through May 4th, 2024, and the museum is located at 3320 Civic Center Drive in Torrance. It's open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Admission to the Torrance Art Museum is always free, and donations are gratefully accepted. This discussion is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel with all of our previous TAMA Talks. You can access it from our website, www.tamadvocates.com. Today, we are joined by artist Suzanne Unrein. Characterized by the fervent energy of gestural mark-making and wide swaths of vibrant, unnatural colors, Suzanne's recent paintings are lyrical forms of civilized society immersed in a wilder existence. Joy, savagery, and carnal sensuality that sometimes references violence are expressed with a contemporary working of paint to create complex, emotional compositions by way of the subconscious rather than analytical mind. The background colors weave through the suggestive narrative forms, denying solidity, while searching for an interconnectedness through instinctual motions. They depict a hybridized nature where animals and people are swept up in an urgent desire to exist, to flourish. The cast of characters conveys shifting psychological states that speak to the ambiguities, transient responses, and faulty storylines of contemporary life. Suzanne's work has been exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the U.S. She is a 2023 grant recipient of the FST Studio Projects Fund, New York, and a 2023-2024 recipient of the Studio Program Residency at Painting Space 122 in New York. Her work was spotlighted in the Oxford Handbook of Perceptual Organization, Oxford University Press, and the focus of the short film, Hands and Eyes, that premiered at the Hamptons International Film Festival and she has had prestigious residencies and fellowships both nationally and internationally. Her work has also been included in several public collections. She is a California native and a current New Yorker by way of Florida. You can read more about her extensive background on her website, SuzanneUnrein.com. So we thank you so very, very much for coming out to chat with us today about your work that's at the TAM in this show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here, Janine. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to navigate. We're going to see this image again. But this is the rush, the trash, and the flesh that is currently on view at the Torrance Art Museum, situated, we'll see in a moment, in a really sweet spot in the gallery, in the main gallery at the museum. So we're going to let you tell us as much as you'd like to share about this piece.
So this piece was titled "The Rush, the Trash, and the Flesh" by a filmmaker friend of mine, Hampton Fancher, who's well known as the writer of Blade Runner and then 2049 after that. And he's named a number of my paintings over the years. But when he saw this one and he named it that, I thought it was just, I loved the title. I thought it really captured the exuberant nature of the painting and you know, all of the energy involved, and you know, it's euphoric, it's energetic, and there's a bit of eroticism in it. It's very much about the visceral, and I think that title implies that.
How unique to have someone else title your work. That's
Yeah,
extraordinary. It's a
yeah,
huge leap of faith, right? I mean,
yeah.
you're really
Well, I
leaving.
wouldn't have to use it, and sometimes I don't. But in this case, I thought, oh, the painting. You know, it was right when Max and Marie picked this painting for the show, and so I thought, well, it's going to California. What better of an idea than to have it, you know, have almost like a film title or, you know, a book title or
Right. Very apropos. Very nice.
yeah.
So the next image I want to share. So this is an image actually off of your website that shows you working, you know, doing this work in progress. And what is it on? Is it on canvas?
It's on canvas. So it's oil on canvas. This painting actually started, I'll give you a little bit of a history of it. It started during the pandemic, in fact, at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I was painting in my apartment, sort of in the lockdown situation. And I had spread it over 3 walls in my living room because it was so large
Oh, wow.
that, you know, it wouldn't fit on one wall. And what I started out, why I wanted to create this painting, I mean, had already started out creating these sort of epic worlds, and where I saw these cast of characters looking, they were in this search for freedom, or search for joy and freedom, and having these visceral experiences. And never did I want to jump into a painting more than during the pandemic, when I, you know, in this case, I've set them on a vessel in the sea, and, you know, they're being transported, but perhaps it's capsizing, or intimately involved with each other, and yet they're completely separated from the rest of the world. And so this event is sort of this wild, my paintings have always had this sort of a Garden of Eden gone awry sort of situation going on. And then instead of being set in, you know, a pastoral setting, it's actually a marine setting. I think a lot of that had to do with this. As you mentioned, I grew up in Florida, born in California, have always do not like being landlocked at all. So the water is really important to me always. So I really enjoy making these paintings that the last several that are these large scale paintings that I think we'll see. They all set them all into water, and it's about a fluidity. You know, the water's about fluidity. The brush strokes are about fluidity. The subject matter is about fluidity, interspecies fluidity. There's sexual fluidity. It's about this idea of interconnectedness, and I want that to, and I think that's just a theme that's going on throughout the paintings, and just this idea of our connecting with nature and other species, and how that connection, we are all a part of each other down to a, you know, molecular level. And so I think that's always going on in the work, and it also goes in the process where I'm making these very lyrical gestural marks, and they create the forms, and then I take these much larger brushes, like in this picture, of swaths of color that will erase and create. And so they're sometimes erasing these lyrical forms, and then they'll get built back up. So it's a destroying and a creating constantly going on. So this painting started back, as I mentioned, like back in the apartment years, you know, 2020. And then it just couldn't get back far enough away from it to really see what was going on, even though the majority of the composition was laid out. So I rolled it up, and then when I got this current residency at this beautiful space in the East Village, it's a 14-foot ceilings, really wonderful size. I was able to get back from it, and I thought, this is perfect. I'm going to set out and finish this painting that I was really excited about for a couple of years in there. And so that's this picture is from my studio where I'm working on finishing it. And in fact, I just finished it just in time for the show. Essentially, it finished in 2024.
So it's definitely, I'm going to toggle back to the first image, because you can see there's a difference.
Yeah,
And
all
so
of the
that's what
upper
I was
right.
going to, right. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you then. So the mark making, the form mark making, like the marks that are made over the paint, do you make the marks first and then add the paint? Do you put the paint down and then mark over it? Or is
I
it a
have
trade secret that you don't want to
I have no secrets, but sadly I have no formula either.
Oh,
So it tends to be just what is coming out. Really, I paint with speed, not meaning that these paintings finish that quickly, but when I'm actually making the marks, it's in a very fast way because I'm trying to have the emotional, the instinctual mark come before any sort of intellectual critiquing of that mark. And so,
so
I,
smart.
you
Yeah.
know, so it really depends. It may be the paint, these larger paint colors are coming, and then I'll go in with the gestural mark, and then it'll end up being erased, and then I'll go back in, and then sometimes I'll see it later and think, oh yeah, no, I don't like that up there, and then I'll erase it completely on purpose, and then I will add different forms, and sometimes it even is from my daily life. I'll see an image. I took a picture the other day, which I know she's going to end up in a painting, of this beautiful this girl that was on the subway, and I just quickly took this shot because she had this very the way she looked, it was this very Madonna sort of quality. She was reading or something, so she was sort of looking down, and I thought, oh, she's going to end up in a painting. So that happens often too, that I may capture something that happened, a diaristic sort of situation, and I'll end up putting it in a piece and erasing something I had that I don't quite feel like it was authentically supposed to be there.
Outstanding. I was going to say too, the palette, I'm drawn personally to the palette. It's very like Dufay-ish to me. So
Yeah.
it's just those kind of colors that are they're very seductive and very they're like almost dreamlike. The palette is amazing.
I do think that it's a dream, they are sort of dreamy, because I feel that I'm creating this other world that I don't know if they even exist. I do think in terms of mythology, or like
Right.
past worlds that had
Yes.
existed, and
Mhm.
melding those with more contemporary figures and these different animals that have shown up here and there, on travels. And so it is a conglomeration of all these different time periods and all of that. And the color is I've put a lot of fluorescent color that I mix in with other colors. But that unnatural color that I find really brings out that idea that this is what sort of world is going on here, as opposed to something very realistic.
Right. It's very Iliad Odyssey-ish to me. Like when
Yeah.
I first saw it, I was thinking back toward those kind of paintings, like
Mm,
paintings from a long time ago that have this very siren-like quality. So
yeah.
love it. All right. So this is Marie Thibeault,
Yes.
who also is a painter. We also did a wonderful talk with her as well, but she co-curated this. Oh, I just noticed the green paint down here too. She co-curated this with Max Presneill, who is the curator at the Torrance Museum, but also a painter in his own right. And so this really was just a coalescence of painters who really, from the way each piece was positioned in the gallery, it was just a love fest of paint.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity I've done studio visits with Marie before, but also had the opportunity to do a studio visit with Max when I was in town, because I live in New York. But I did go out for the opening and was out there for about 10 days. And it was great talking paint with him, great talking paint with Marie. It was wonderful being out there and meeting all the artists, some who I knew, but some from the New York, Barbara Friedman I knew, who I think you've already interviewed her, but and then got to meet some of the LA artists that it was really great to talk paint with other painters.
And that's extraordinary too. I mean, I do think both Marie and Max, but Max has expressed on many occasions this idea of bringing artists together, creating those
Yeah.
relationships.
Well, I had art actually started with spray paint because I was working, and then everything got covered up because it was just over the process of it. And sometimes I'll put it on the floor, sometimes I put it on the wall. It really does just change depending on where I just instinctually feel like creating at that moment.
And that's really the whole, that's what differentiates you. So I think that's tremendous. I'm getting a Hades feel from this, like
yeah, I can see that too.
Yeah.
I feel like it starts out sort of as this idea of an Eden, yet it always goes into this chaotic. I think where life comes in, where the world comes in, where this idea of isolation, yet in their dependence within this group of characters. But then the isolation is often, I feel like, you look at the world, it's sort of self-constructed, and there's no real, whereas really we are so interconnected, yet we act as if we're not. And so I think
it's a little bit of that abstract version of the Garden of Earthly Delights.
yes, exactly.
So this is from the opening, which again, everything that I've heard from all of the artists who have generously given their time to chat with us about the show and their pieces in the show have all said the same thing. It was just really wonderful to interact with the other artists. I'm actually talking with Galen this afternoon.
Oh, great.
Galencini, yes. And so, it's and interestingly, when you're looking at your work from this perspective, it's you can see other aspects of it. Just maybe the way
I find that too. I find that
it's always changing. Like, oh, I didn't see that before.
Yeah, it is. It's probably one of the most figurative paintings in the show. I mean, Barbara has some elements of figuration also. And then and a couple of other people do talk about it a bit, but it also has the abstraction in it, of course, too. And so I think depending on how you're viewing it, you can see, and it's interesting too, doing studio visits with people when they come to my studio, because some people don't see a lot of it, and then other people see almost all of it. So it's really interesting how people think or how they visualize things, and whether they need a complete form to be able to see something or not. It's quite interesting.
I think it's interesting in the upper right how you've left those animals and in the form, how you've left them almost in black and white.
Yeah. Those were the last of the characters that ended up on this painting. They weren't in the one that you saw where I was working on it.
Right.
And I think talking about the artificiality of painting for one, and not having this be about any sort of representation. So really taking the drawing aspects and the painting aspects and trying to separate them, sort of separating the literal from the more abstract. So I think so some of that was playing in this.
Wonderful. And this is where this is how it's hung inside the museum. So it's right when you that entrance that you see there is the lobby. So when you're walking in, you walk right in to see it, which is wonderful. It's large. That's a huge wall, and so
it's a really large painting. It's one of my larger paintings. It's 133 inches by 88 inches.
Did you bring it when you came? So you brought it with you when you came from New York?
I actually shipped it from New York.
Okay.
I had shipped it rolled up, and then the stretchers I actually had made in New York and shipped those from New York as well, only because they were cheaper than shipping them than actually having them made in LA and not shipping them. So it's kind of a strange situation that way. But I just know all the art people. I only know all the paint people here, so it's who knows. But yeah, that's how I ended up getting out there.
And it's interesting, even in this piece, and I should have probably included some other pieces that are just of the gallery, but one of the things that artists have been commenting on, and one of the things that I notice when I go into the Torrance Art Museum, is that, and Marie very, very demurely kind of moved to Max for this, but she was saying, excuse me, that even though she was very involved in the selection of the pieces process, the hanging she left to Max. It is a gift of his. And so even in this piece, you can see the yellows in your piece, you know, either the yellows of the piece on the wall, the smaller piece, everything sort of blends in from either a color perspective or a line perspective. And there's a common thread that runs through almost all of the work, the way that it's placed next to each other. And so
I agree. I think he did an amazing job with the curation of it. I love seeing how each piece worked with another piece, with another piece. And this painting next to mine is by Michael Bauer, and it is also of a world. It to me it has cosmic things going on in his painting. And so to put those two together, I found interesting. And then the one on the other side is by Audrey, who I don't know if you have interviewed her. I think I
yes,
saw that
Tulumiera
one.
Welsh. Yes.
Yeah, and so I thought hers with the whole mapping, I thought that was an interesting thing as well. So there was like these certain sort of themes going on there
And she
that worked
also
well together.
was experiencing, if I'm remembering correctly, she also was experiencing with spray paint in
Oh,
that.
was she too?
Yes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she was
that's
adding it.
interesting.
So
Yeah, that's great.
before we move off of this piece, because I think the next piece is some of your other work, did you want to speak at all to the theme of the show, the risky business theme of AI, and how your thoughts on that?
I really related to the idea of risky business as being about chance, and um, more about chance in the process of creating the painting. So for me, that involved the speed of the brush stroke, having it be more of that intuitive mark making, and also the chance of how the color weaves in and out of the gestural forms. And I think that was another way that it's like what it picks up and the chance involved with that. Um, in terms of AI, I mean, I think for me, it just has more to do with, I think my paintings and my way in the world is more of a kinetic sort of experiential thing. And it's personal in so much as that I'm the one in the world creating this, or being in the world. And I think they're probably inner experiences that then come out to the outer world. It's sort of trying to balance what's going on inside us, and what's going on and outside, and making a connection between those. So I suppose in terms of AI, which I find AI to be fascinating in many respects, and certainly could improve our world by allowing us to not have to do a lot of mundane things that AI is willing to do. But yet, in terms of creating something, that inner world is presumably not going to be the same as a human's inner world.
Exactly. I mean,
Presumably.
right. I mean, that's sort of the key there, is that the motivation, is sometimes hard to
Right.
put into words. And if I don't have those words, then I cannot generate anything in AI. It has not yet, to my knowledge, been able to replicate that emotional response, or an emotional drive, or an emotional propensity to try to get a certain concept from your brain and your heart and your soul onto a canvas. So
Right. I mean, I think also what I hadn't mentioned is with this, and all of my paintings, really, there's also this the way they're painted with the lines and the paint, and the connecting, yet also breaking up at points. Also speaks to shifting psychological states and shifting emotional states, and I think that is something so innately human, of just how we are in the world, and
Right.
from one minute to the next, depending
Right.
on what our mind tells us to think about.
So this next piece, love this piece. Is this in your studio also?
It is. This is
Okay.
this one's in my studio. This is called The Sea, the Sea. This is, one of the several of these large scale paintings I did. Another cast of characters. This one, I feel they're actually being transported and not capsized. It did several variations of this, and it's that theme, but it's also just playing with color, playing with the gestural line. How much can I erase and to keep just keep being able to see figures and being able to see a connection. These, I think, really the hybrids are more obvious, where they collided so much that they became these hybrids, and I find that to be an interesting idea, both in mythological creatures, yet also just this idea of fluidity today that we have in every respect.
Absolutely. Again, I'm drawn to both the color, but also the subject and the whole shape of the boat, all of it.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Thank you.
This is different. This is not at the TAM, but this is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, this is the biggest
Yeah.
one. I think this is 144 inches by 96 inches, I think.
Wow.
And this was in a lobby in downtown New York at the 180 Maiden Lane building. And it's called Lost in the Harbor. And the characters, how I position them is that they're in a boat, but there's another boat off to the side with a figure in it. And some of these animals have fallen off or taken off or gotten out of the boat, and they're in floats on rafts, and so they all have their different sort of pod that they're existing on. And this one has a lot of fluidity, but then there's some fragments in there as well that and a lot of sort of erasing. The bodies would be a full body, and then I'd cut the head off or replace it with an animal head or something along those lines. And this one, it's called What Lies Ahead. And this one was, I often look at the paintings after I finish them and wonder how much joy is involved and how much non-joy is going involved.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something ominous about this one to me.
I think it's for me, it's that the juxtaposition of the is it a little maybe monkey kind of figure on the end, the orange and the magenta together. I don't even know if that's magenta, like a fuchsia. It's beautiful on the.
Is it the one the bottom right?
Actually, on the lower bottom on the left side.
Oh, lower left. Oh yeah, those are two monkeys on the lower left.
Yes. And so the fact that they are in that most vibrant color, in those warm colors, and then when you move across that lime and the orange together, I don't know. It's appealing to my love of color. Those are the colors that I am very, very much drawn to. So very beautiful. Love this. And again, super moving.
Yeah. Also on another boat. And those, monkeys are, we think of them as mischievous practical jokers, which I find them to be comic relief a lot of the time. And we met some of them in Bali. I spent some time in Indonesia, and I had the most fun with them. They were jumping all over me. They were using me as a jungle gym at one point. They were just jumping around.
Wow.
It was such a fun. I was trying to sketch them, and they were taking my pen away from me and my pad of paper. And but it was so fun. And then I ended up having to photograph them. So they've ended up in my paintings over time because I had such a great experience with them. It was really, they would look at you as if, and you're looking back at them and you just see how connected we are as beings, as sentient beings in the world. And monkeys are also, in many cultures, have thought about, people think of them as symbolizing adaptability and the ability to navigate through life's challenges. And so I find that to be a really interesting idea too. So whether you want to look at them as these mischievous creatures in these paintings, or as more of a, positive, role models.
Yes,
They
because
could
I'm
be
going
either.
to actually navigate back to the piece in the TAM because I was concentrating on this, the monkey in the upper left-hand corner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the shape of the tail, or I was thinking flying monkeys from the Wizard of Oz. This is
Yeah.
one of those pieces that that you could sit in front of and really create a wonderful narrative in your mind about what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So
One of the I don't tend to think of them as really that as narratives necessarily, all those narrative elements in them, but it is more to me about shifting psychological states, or shifting emotional states of sort of this high energy, um, uh, being an experience, painting being an experience, living being an experience, trying to paint what that is to be alive, and to have the freedom of who we are. I think of it more of that, but then obviously stories that come to you, end up in my thinking as well. And there's a story about how Silver Springs. Have you heard of Silver Springs, Florida? Which was
no,
not that far from where I grew up. But years ago, this guy decided he wanted to create a like an amusement park in Silver Springs on this island. And so he got a bunch of monkeys and he thought, oh, I'm going to put them on the island. And there is going to be this great experience. People come to the island, they get to see these monkeys that are not supposed to be here. And but what he didn't realize is that they could swim. And so they jumped off the island. They were able to mate so much so that there ended up being, they went from like 40 to like thousands. And they ended up, carrying all sorts of diseases. So it became this, this thing where people had decided upon, creating something that they thought would be this wonderfully amusing thing for humans. And it ended up wreaking havoc to the environment and everything else. And
sure.
I find that is just one of those many things where you think, what are we doing?
Right. Right. That's so it's like a whole invasive species,
Right.
we bring something that really doesn't belong into
Right.
environment because we personally like it, or we think it's going to look good in our yard, or we think, we just
Right.
really, we do it purely from a not knowledgeable, idiotic place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
We just
exactly.
do it very impulsively. We don't spend any
Right.
time thinking about it. And then the next thing you know, like you said, you've kind of caused a much farther reaching problem that you have no clue how to even begin to solve.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's very, very interesting. So we'll go through. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate the fact that you came out and met with us today to talk about your work. I'm so happy you're in the show. It's up through May 4th in the main gallery at the Torrance Art Museum. In Gallery 2, there is a show that is on loan of Albrecht Dürer, Goya, and Rembrandt. I don't know if you had a
A
chance.
wonderful show. Wonderful.
Yeah,
I
did
saw
you get a
that.
chance to step in
Oh
and see
yeah.
it?
Yeah, it's great.
So, and that's very, very, I don't think we've done anything like that the museum has done anything like that. So it's really wonderful. It was hard to book those three for a TAMA talk. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that. But yeah, there's just a lot happening over there. So hopefully you'll have an opportunity to stop by the Torrance Art Museum before the show closes. And we're just so happy to have you with us today, Suzanne. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. And I really do. I want to say too, I hope people come down for the show because it's such a beautiful show. And I think it's a friend of mine who got a chance to see it last weekend said it's the best show she's seen in 3 to 4 years. So she said every single painting in it is superb, and she was just ecstatic about it. So I'm hoping that other people will get a chance to see